Good afternoon, everyone. Now for today, we'll start with some good news and some bad news. As good news, we're going to be making a lovely dish that's traditional from the region in which I was born, actually. Bad news, unfortunately, the main ingredient, these boys, you won't be able to find them. But still, I think it's worthwhile just to give your own spin and put your own sausages in there. But we're going to make sausages into a tomato sauce. And to be more precise, these are actually sausages containing horse meat. I of course can hear the British already going like, you eat horse? How shocking. Well, we'll get more into the history of this dish as well as we're cooking. But they do indeed contain a bit, or a part of it is horse meat. There is of course some pork in there as well, but not really a very hard casserole to make. But what we're going to need, that's going to be indeed our sausages. Again, use what you can find. Maybe a lovely spicy Italian sausage or something like that would be nice in this dish. We're going to use onions, a bit of celery. We will be using some mustard, mushrooms, and some tomato sauce. In this case, I choose for just simple sieve passata. It's the easiest solution. But enough said, let's get cooking, guys. First order of business, we want to actually brown up our sausages a little bit. Now I do say just brown them. I think I'm gonna add about 2 more. So I just want some color on these guys. I don't want to cook them through. Not necessary. They will cook in the they will continue cooking into the sauce. But I just want some color on these things. Now what I quickly wanted to do is again explain the history of these peculiar sausages. Again, they're a regional specialty from a town very close to where I live. And the history basically being, the town had a very rich history in, well, tanning hides, especially horse hides. And what happened is a lot of horses actually came into the town, that they mainly bought up old work horses that were bought up from, well, the Port of Antwerp, the coal mines all across the country. They were shipped there and stripped of their hide. Now, people being people, they did not want to waste the chance of having meat. So the butchers tried their best, but of course, if you can imagine, these animals didn't have an easy life. They were literally worked to death, which made that the meat was very old, tough, and muscly. So people being people again, the only solution they could find was, of course, turn that into mincemeat. Next problem you have, well, horse meat, it's A, lean, B, pretty strong in flavor. So the only reason they found was mix it up with some pork, turn it into sausages, and to actually get rid of some of the strong flavor in the sausage, they actually started cooking this into a homemade tomato sauce. So that's the basic history of how this dish came to be. Again, the sausages, chances of you finding them pretty non-existent. If anybody would be interested, I could look into actually showing you how to make them from scratch. But we're going to brown these up, and of course, next port of call, that'll be our vegetables. Now, as you can see, our sausages have browned somewhat. Again, they're not cooked through, but that's the entire point. And it's time to, of course, add our veggies. There we go. I've added a little bit extra butter, not too much. Now, as for weights and measurements, you do want a good bit of onion in this sauce. It's going to provide some lovely sweetness inside our sauce. And we are going to let this glaze on, well, medium to low heat, because we want these onions to brown up somewhat. So I have about 3/4 of a kilo of sausage, to which I've added 2 medium onions and about 1 good stalk of celery, nicely all finely chopped up. Again, I want this to get some nice color, some nice sweetness in those onions. Meanwhile, we'll be chopping up our mushrooms, after which we can basically assemble our dish. Well, our onions are starting to get some color. The only thing that's left is to add about 200 grams of our mushrooms. We're going to let these sit and stew along for a few minutes as well, so that our onions can still get some more color, but also our mushrooms can start to wither down a little bit. Our mushrooms have been allowed to cook down. They're not fully cooked through yet. Now, great thing when you're working with mushrooms, there's not really a need to deglaze the pot with anything. As they start cooking through, they start losing water. So the only thing left, well, that's to add our sausages back and make our sauce. So we're going to add a full packet, 500 mils of our passata. I will rinse this out with some water just to add a little bit more water. And what we also want to add is about, well, 2 good tablespoons of mustard. Now, this pot was running near empty, so I'm just going to add a tad bit more. There we go. Now this is something you can of course do for flavor. If you want some more spiciness, you can put in some more mustard or add a little less to your liking. This is going to stew for about 45 minutes, at which point I'll just remove the sausages, cut them up, and we will basically be done. The only thing that's left to do, of course, is to season. Now, there's not a lot of spices that go into this. Usually some of the classics are just some basic, well, use the other one, thyme. I forgot to get it on hand, but also 1 or 2 bay leaves. And of course, season to taste with salt and pepper. We're through cooking, and as I already mentioned before, what I do like to do before I actually serve up is basically to, well, cut up my sausages into bite-sized pieces. This is a matter of personal preference, but it's just, for me at least, practical this way. Cutting the sausages that are dripped in sauce, it's not always, or it can get a little messy, especially when you're working with tomato sauce. So just to avoid any stains, I cut these up. We're going to give this about 5 more minutes to heat everything through, and we'll basically be done. Now, just one thing I forgot to mention. As to plating this up, well, only one thing you can do, in my opinion. You serve this with, it's a Belgian dish. You serve this with fries, you serve this with a nice beer, and really it needs nothing more.